Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine. Today I'm sharing with you the books and resources that can complement a grade 8 Waldorf-inspired approach. You can use these resources to complement an existing curriculum, or you can use these resources to build your own main lesson block in English, which includes literature, grammar, composition, and drama. If you are looking to build your own main lesson block and you want to have a Waldorf approach, one of the best resources is the educational tasks and content of the Steiner Waldorf Curriculum. So I'm going to share with you this book first, but I'm going to put aside our grammar books and our literature books, and we're going to dive into those a little bit later. There are a lot of choices that you can make when it comes to literature and short stories. And so I only have a few samples for you today, but I want to give you the basic approach, the Waldorf approach for grade 8, so that you can make your own selections when it comes to choosing literature works, even grammar workbooks, and most excitingly, the play that you want to do for this year, which can be a little bit more challenging if you are a homeschooler versus if you're in a co-op or you're in a classroom setting. Educational tasks and content is actually probably the most robust resource in understanding what each of the grades needs as far as their main lesson blocks, and is so authentic in describing exactly the Waldorf pedagogical approaches for each of these grades and the subjects. However, it is a challenging book to go through, in my opinion. It has been really helpful, but overall, I find that having an actual Waldorf curriculum is a little bit easier, especially if you're a homeschooler. And so this is really, in my opinion, written and intended for the classroom setting. But what I do like about this is that it's going to give you the most complete look at all of the nuances within those subject areas for each of the main lesson blocks. And it's going to give you the framework and a checklist of the tasks that you want to achieve in each of these grade levels. However, it is not very big. It is packed with information, but it leaves a lot to the teacher in order to create these main lesson blocks, in order to create the curriculum and find the resources. So this is not an easy task to go through. It is time consuming. This book goes through the curriculum in a vertical manner rather than a horizontal manner. So instead of looking at each grade level and looking at all of the main lesson blocks within that grade, it goes through the subject areas and shows how that subject area is built throughout the grades. So the chemistry curriculum is going to start in grade 6 and go through 12th grade. But for other subject areas, for instance, you will start in grade 1. So art studies starts in grade 1 all the way through 12th grade. So this is going to take you through a journey to see how the art studies changes year to year. And I'm glad that it says art studies, because in general, when I see art in the curriculum, other than say in 7th grade, starting with like perspective drawing, I usually see art as an artistic representation of the lesson rather than specific art instruction. And this is going to go through and explain that approach so that you can build on those skills and bring the appropriate pedagogical practices to each of these grade levels. So let's look specifically at English language and literature. This is not the foreign language. Foreign language has a different trajectory, and it is spoken in the first couple of years of instruction before you move into the written language and grammar. So let's move into grade 8, and it is worthwhile going from grade 1 through grade 7 to see how these concepts are built. How to do the lesson is not included in this book so far that I've seen. Understanding how to actually put together a main lesson. You're going to see that more in an actual curriculum. I also have this one to share with you today, but only briefly because the entire Waldorf curriculum by Live Education for grade 8 is in a separate video that is linked in the description box below, along with the other videos that look at the different subject areas like history and math and science. If you want to put together your own main lesson blocks for grade 8, I encourage you to check those out as well. The thing that is so helpful about having a boxed curriculum is that if you are just doing the one grade, this works really well, especially if you have like say a co-op or you are a teacher in a school. But when you are homeschooling with multiple grades and multiple age ranges and abilities, then I found that putting together a somewhat more of a unit study approach to our main lesson block worked a little bit better, because I could bring in resources and projects that were a bit more suitable for the younger students and the older students as well. But I also feel like doing the main lesson block for whatever child it was intended and letting everyone else participate in their own capacity works just as well. And in some cases, I think it works better. And if you still wanted to bring in that unit study approach for your other children into that main lesson block or main lesson, I would suggest bringing in those resources in your opening lessons. So understanding how to put together a main lesson and a main lesson block. So putting together your main lesson block and understanding how to do the main lesson block is going to be really helpful, because not all subjects are done daily. Oftentimes they are on a block rotation and they cycle through, and sometimes they're split up and then there are other main lesson blocks in the middle. So having that understanding is going to be helpful, because there are two subject areas that I think are already daily lessons, and even if they're not, they should be, and that would be English or language arts and math. And the way that these lessons are done daily is one of practice and proficiency, and it might not necessarily be new learning every day. Your main lesson block might be the opportunity for the new learning, which is then practiced and mastered throughout the year in these smaller daily classes. So the tasks for grade 8 are not dissimilar to the tasks for grade 7. We're building on grade 7. They are similar, but you're going to move into literature that, in my opinion, is well suited for 8th grade, but also is really well suited for high school. So we're looking at resources that can bring in modern history. They should contain some biographical resources and emotional content. So children or students in 8th grade are around 13 or 14 years old, and they are post-puberty for most of them, although some may not have reached puberty yet. And they're just at the cusp of this next 7-year cycle where they're moving from the feeling stage of development to the thinking stage of development. So right in this transition time, there is this new, say, appreciation or ability to have greater insight, not just in the feeling capacity or in the feeling stage of development, but now in the thinking stage of development. So their thinking is starting to change. It's gone from imagination, picture-driven, where you learn through embodied examples, to being able to learn through abstract concepts, through logic and your intellect. So bringing in poetry and literature that allows the student to think more deeply about the content is just right for middle school and really appropriate for 8th and 9th grade. Some literature sources are mentioned in the Waldorf approach, and so they are mentioned here too. So specifically Schiller, Herder, and Goethe were mentioned, and some specific passages, so you may use those resources as well. What I like about the Waldorf approach, though it's not always practiced this way, is that when you understand child development, you can use the resources that are going to fit your cultural and religious needs. These resources are more Western or Eurocentric in a way, so I encourage you to take these resources and find other ones that serve the same purpose but are more authentic for your particular family needs. So in addition to some of the authors and resources suggested, which I will show you some of the literature that we have, it then goes in to explain one of the most exciting things about Waldorf education, but specifically what you're going to experience in 8th grade, and that's going to be a drama performance. So theater. Now, theater is not an elective subject area in Waldorf education. It is part of the curriculum. And while it's not maybe the kinds of theater productions you might expect say at a high school level, they are such important pedagogical practices that are so important for the students that it's highly encouraged that you're able to do one. And even more so than doing a drama performance, having the teacher actually write the play is going to allow each of those students to really shine and grow in their own capacity. So it is recommended that the teacher either adapts a current play to fit the students in the classroom or to write one on their own, which sounds amazing and so overwhelming. But this way, especially by grade 8, the teacher has been with the classroom, hopefully, for these past 7 years. The teacher really knows the students, their capacities, their capabilities, their interests, etc., and can tailor characters or parts of the play that can help that student grow and shine at the same time. So you don't want to just take like the most proficient speaker or someone who's really good at theater and put them in the main role. You're going to you'll probably have an amazing play, but you might lose some of the learning opportunities if you can switch things around and really understand each of your students. So by this point, grammar should be well established. The students by grade 1, 2, and 3 have learned the basic skills in reading and writing and comprehension. And by grade 3, they're beginning with their grammar. By grade 8, grammar should be well established. However, there is some indications on what you can do in order to make sure that grammar, spelling, vocabulary is up to grade level. Bringing in vocabulary is best suited through the content of literature, poetry, or verses, whatever it is that you're reading. I find that to be the easiest, most organic way to bring in vocabulary. Spelling, then, what I have found in practice is that my students could get, A+ on their spelling test, which honestly, we didn't really do much spelling tests, but we would do like maybe some grammar worksheets, for instance, and they would do excellent on the grammar worksheets. And then when they were doing their narrative writing for their main lesson block or their main lesson, there would be all kinds of grammar errors and spelling errors. So that work that we did in grammar didn't necessarily translate into the written work. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for practical application of these concepts that are learned. What I found was that focusing on the written portion of my students' work allowed me to see those areas that needed assistance and help in order for them to have that grammar understanding go from the theory, in essence, to the practical. By this point, students have been writing for several years. They're writing daily in their main lesson books, but now we're going to take writing to a new level. We're going to explore different types of writing styles. For instance, here it says to write a formal business letter, which I have some thoughts on that. But then we're going to look at writing a scientific document or experiment. So in chemistry, for instance, students may do a lab report for one of their chemistry demonstrations, or when they are doing their main lesson book entry, the style of writing for a lab demonstration is going to be very different than a narrative written explanation of the content. So now we're looking at different types of purposes for the writing. You have personal diary or journal, descriptive essays, adventure story. We can look at some creative writing stories, short poem. Let's move on to looking at Wish, Wonder, and Surprise. This is the language or the literature curriculum by Live Education. This is an amazing Waldorf resource that goes through not just the resources that are included for you to put together your main lessons, but also it explains the pedagogical approaches for this grade, what is happening with your student. You cannot buy this separately. You do need to buy it with all of the other main lesson blocks for grade 8. This is going to be your best option at having something that is complete, tailored, includes all of the resources. Even the other main lesson books include the historical passages that you need in order to present your lessons. The chemistry book includes the demonstrations as well and the illustrations. So it's really complete in that way. But also it explains how to do the main lesson, how to do a 2 or 3 day rhythm with your main lesson, how to approach these subject areas uniquely, not just for the grade level, but also for the subject area. This book is going to go through passages that are either passages from novels, or it will suggest books that have short stories that can be used for the presentation. As a teacher, you may pick and choose or choose other resources entirely. But what I really like about this, that I did not quite see it explained in the educational tasks and content, is that it explains what wish, wonder, and surprise are and how important they are as modalities for the student in grade 8. And that's going to be the theme that I think runs through all of your literature selections, is understanding these modalities. They're not feelings. Feelings are more fleeting. But the modality of wish, wonder, and surprise. And we can imagine that wish is this longing for what could be. They are our hopes and they are our ideals. And that feeling or that modality is oriented towards the future. So the things that you're aspiring to. Now, in addition to this, I try to include things that are going to be relevant for us as a religious family. So I included things like prayer as part of those aspirations rather than wish. I thought of it more as a prayer. Then you have wonder, and that's our sense of awe. And a sense of awe has been a theme since the very beginning in Waldorf education. You see it in grade 1, and then you see it throughout all of the grades as well. For me, again, as a religious family, when we look at awe and reverence, we bring that back to a spiritual core. And so when we're looking at wonder in this context, it can always be a way back to bring it to the spiritual. And students of this age, and as they grow into adolescence, will definitely be finding their spiritual core. So wonder, it's a sense of awe and curiosity, and it's an openness to the world. Now, we can also see this as a present orientation when we're having awe and reverence that is of the moment. We're not having awe and reverence of the future. This is not a future modality. This is very much a present modality. And even if you were thinking of the past, like you're thinking of, say, an amazing waterfall, a tree, a landscape, even if you're thinking about the past, you're feeling it in the present. And then the last one is surprise or astonishment, and that's with the unexpected. Now, we meet the unexpected every day. It could be in small things, it could be in big things, and a lot of times it's not always in the things that bring us joy. So surprise in something that brings you joy is what we're looking for. It's something that's unexpected, it's out of the ordinary, and it reveals a deeper meaning towards the unexpected. It's in some ways an appreciation for those moments. Now, as adults, we have fewer and fewer opportunities to experience surprise, and some absolutely do not like surprises at all. So it's really important to understand. I should say that probably we all like surprises, but there are some surprises that we don't like. Some people absolutely don't like a surprise party. Other people love it so much. But say a surprise package in the mail, that could be so joyous for just about anybody. So it's important that we understand these surprises, or rather we should understand our students and our children so we can understand what surprises we can cultivate for them. Because as a teacher, if you know that this is a modality, especially for this age range, you can cultivate surprises for your classroom or for your students. Surprises can be very simple. It could be, for instance, as a homeschooler, that I'm almost done homeschooling my children. There would be opportunities with just my youngest daughter at the time, 15. I might say spontaneously, let's go out for matcha, or let's call this friend, let's see if she wants to go for ice cream. Something that was out of the ordinary, unexpected, and joyful for her. She is a social person. She loves these kinds of activities. She loves being out of the house. So these are kinds of surprises that would really bring her joy, and it's something out of the ordinary. Bringing those things in the classroom, as a teacher, as you know your classroom, you will find ways to bring the unexpected surprise to your students, to bring them joy. One more resource that is especially oriented towards the Waldorf pedagogy is Continuing the Journey to Literacy. This is for grades 4 through 8. The roadmap to literacy is for grades 1 through 3. These are extremely big books. They go through a lot of content, and the content approach is also in a vertical manner rather than a horizontal manner, which can make it a little bit difficult to find the content that you need, since it's going to go through topic areas and then look at it from grade to grade. Let's look at essays. First, it's going to give you the indications for this particular subject area, as well as what this chapter is going to cover, and why that particular subject area is important. Essay writing isn't going to be introduced early on because the skills that a first, second, and third grader are learning in language arts are the basic skills of reading, writing, and comprehension. So essay writing comes after those basic skills have been mastered. Narrative writing is different than essay writing, so this is going to go through on how to teach these kinds of writing approaches. Let me show you for grades 7 and 8 some of the benchmarks for essays. Students can write themes about topics for main lesson blocks, including exploring the same topic from different points of view or making opposing arguments. Then we can see that they need to be able to write a 5-paragraph essay. When my children have done their essays, we have written them on pages outside of the main lesson book. The main lesson book is generally used for those final drafts, whether they're narrations or illustrations. Let's move on to correspondence. What I love is that this book actually talks about the things that I previously mentioned when speaking about educational tasks and content, referring to the types of communication that a student will need to do. It's not just the business letter. Right here, when it says continue with business letters, I just also added professional email as well. This book is for grades 4 through 8. So you see that this section here talks about grades 4 through 6, and then we're going to move into grades 7 and 8 as well. Grades 7 and 8 is put together a lot, not just in this book, but also in the educational tasks and content, just because a lot of the information, or rather the needs of the students, are really similar in grades 7 and 8. There are definitely nuances and developmental changes between the two, but a lot of the skills and the work is pretty similar. 8th grade is a bit of a threshold. It's this ending and beginning at the same time. So we're looking to complete everything that's in elementary middle school, which means that there has to be proficiency in reading, writing, and arithmetic before they move into the high school years and really dive into the content kind of all over again, to be honest, but this time with a new approach because their thinking has developed. Spelling, vocabulary, and grammar are also mentioned. So while the Waldorf curriculum by Live Education isn't going to have a grammar section, it is still advised that you continue with grammar if necessary. I think that a lot of the grammar at this point, in my experience, was ones that I would see within the essay writing. We really need to see that the grammar that the grammar, vocabulary, spelling that the students had learned previously was really able to take from those theoretical lessons into the practical. Let's move on and look at some of the grammar resources. The first book I want to share with you is How to Build a Better Vocabulary. This is a very old book, and it belonged to my mother, and it was copyrighted in 1949, and then this book is from 1961. What I like about these old resources is that sometimes I think that they are simple in their instruction and rich in their content. So while I can't quite use this book because of its fragility, I do really like having these resources to give me an insight on how vocabulary was taught in the previous century. I love when vocabulary can be taught through stories or through literature, because then you get the context. What I like about this book and what I like about vocabulary or words in general is the etymology, and that would be the history of the word and how it came to be. Words do change meaning over time. And so some words that we see in literature, especially if we're going to be bringing literature to the 8th grade student where they are accustomed to seeing a word used today in a different context, it is important to understand the history of the word and, of course, the meaning of that word when it was used within that literature context. So, for instance, this book is going to go through a little bit of this context as well, explaining where these words come from, the root meaning in a sense, or I should say the historical meaning, and then how it is used today. For instance, this kind of relevance to words is what I love so much that you can probably find in some older dictionaries. But this is the kind of book that I think gives you context for how vocabulary is changing or how the words in context would mean something different. So if you can find an older resource, I highly recommend you do. Actually, the comma goes here. This book I purchased a little bit more recently. This was for my high school students and 8th grade students, 7th, 8th grade, for just having a basic book that you could refer to for all of the questions you had regarding grammar. A lot of students are using technology to answer these questions. Technology actually does a better job because the book is going to be limited in its scope of how much it can give you for those specific situations. But still, I think it's important to be able to have a hard copy of a grammar book the same way you would have a hard copy of a thesaurus and a dictionary. It's really important that we have those resources for our students and can leverage the technology when necessary. And I would say leverage it more in the high school years versus the elementary years, because in elementary, we're still learning these basic skills. So we don't want to become lazy with spelling or grammar because we assume that the embedded spelling and grammar tools or program is going to just naturally fix those things for us. We do want to have those skills before we rely on the technology to fix our mistakes. Another book that we have is called The Only Grammar Book You'll Ever Need. It also comes with this workbook, The Only Grammar and Style Workbook You'll Ever Need. I did really like this workbook. However, I liked that it was more geared towards the older student, but there is a particular type of workbook that I don't prefer, and that is the workbooks and the spelling books that are going to purposefully make the mistake that you have to correct. I don't like students seeing those mistakes. I'd rather them see the complete sentence written correctly rather than have the visual of a spelling or a word that's misspelled or grammar mistakes, because that visual imprinting can be very hard to erase and replace with the correct spelling or the correct grammar. So I do like that this is like a simple version. It coordinates with the book. It explains like what the topic area that you were learning, and then it has like the examples. But I still don't like seeing the mistakes that need to be corrected. I would rather my students review their own work in their written narrations for their main lesson and be critical about reviewing their work to make sure they can catch their own mistakes. I think that is a better way to approach a grammar lesson than seeing in print something that has been misspelled or incorrect grammar. The Only Grammar Book You'll Ever Need is another small pocket grammar book that I've actually used often myself. And this is another resource that is not fully complete in the sense that you might run into grammar issues that are not contained in the book. However, it's going to give you the majority of the grammar rules that you need in order to do basic writing and essays. I also want to share with you Tooth and Nail. This is a novel approach to the SATs. So the SATs are a test that students will take in high school, and there is an English portion to the SATs where vocabulary is tested. So trying to learn all of the vocabulary can be very daunting, especially if you're doing it through flashcards. And so this book allows you to learn all of these vocabulary words in context and in an interesting story, and all of the vocabulary words are in bold so that if you still don't understand them in context, you can look them up. So this is a really great resource for those students who really need to have that vocabulary in context and in an enjoyable way. Grammatically correct. I also use this book for late elementary and into high school, and this was also a really great resource for me as an adult who was needing to put together these main lessons for my students. So this is not just going to be great for 8th grade. This will be great for adults who want to approach grammar and English for their students in a way that you can then be creative with your lessons. It's going to give you all of the grammar rules that you might have overlooked, or you might not know how to teach because they are second nature to you. This is going to allow you to have that information so that you can put together your lessons. And I don't find this to be incredibly useful for a student unless they specifically want it as a resource that's a little bit more robust than some of the other resources that I shared with you. I have a couple more resources. The Perfect English Grammar Workbook. I was exploring other workbooks for my students, and we used this one a little bit, and it was okay. It's short, it's concise, it relates to the lesson. It's very easy, or it's easily laid out, I should say. We didn't use it quite as much as I expected, and it's for those quick lessons, almost like review lessons. Like suppose you've gotten, say, to 9th grade, and you want to make sure that those grammar rules are really shored up back in 8th grade, then you might use this just to have a quick review over these different topic areas within grammar. And then you have these little assessments or exercises, practice exercises that go along with each of these smaller subject areas. Overall, this is a really great resource because it is laid out in a very simple manner. It is not as overwhelming or robust as this resource that can be kind of a lot to get through. This one is very user-friendly, and so for that reason I wanted to share it with you. Before I show you the sentence diagram book, let me show you the Blue Book of Grammar and Punctuation. This is another book that's also laid out in a very easy manner. The font is bigger, the pages are bigger, and even those little things actually make it a little bit easier to get through, especially if you find the way that this book is laid out too overwhelming, because it can be, especially when you're trying to digest these concepts, either as a teacher to present them or as a student. I find that this is a very easy manner to digest and understand it. The chapters are very well laid out. You also go through a vocabulary or a spelling list for words that are commonly confused or they're homonyms, and so this is important to have, and this is probably not even the complete list, but this is the most common ones, and then it goes through other grammar rules as well. So overall, oh, and I forgot, it does have the quizzes in the back, which is really great. You could photocopy these or just have the student review these and write them on a separate sheet of paper as well. Then the last resource I want to share with you is grammar and diagramming sentences. I absolutely love sentence diagramming, but I found that this resource was far too complicated to bring to my students, and I ended up writing my own sentence diagramming workbook for my students based primarily on the sentence diagramming workbook by Susan Weiss-Bauer and her English curriculum, Writing with Ease and First Language Lessons. I found that resource to be tremendously beneficial in our homeschool, extremely user-friendly, and the lessons were short. They were dedicated to a particular topic area, and I feel like, especially with sentence diagramming, my students really understood the structure of a sentence very well. What I found with this book is that it got complicated really fast, and what I liked about Susan Weiss Bauer's approach was that it took you step by step very slowly through the concepts, and it built on the sentence diagramming concept or structure very slowly as well. I really like programs that its aim is to teach the student, not to test the student. I don't like workbooks that are a little bit tricky or a little bit challenging. I want the students to learn the material very well before they encounter those challenging situations. And I find that this book was just a little bit too advanced, but I had a hard time finding sentence diagram books when I was doing this with my 8th grade student at the time. And so this is a book that I picked up that ended up not being quite as user-friendly and quite the approach that I wanted, but I did want to share it with you in case you were interested in this book or you want to see the inside of the book and see what sentence diagramming is all about. I honestly do not remember doing sentence diagramming when I was a student in school, but I do know my peers, other people did do sentence diagramming, so that when I brought it to my students, it was a novel concept to me in the beginning. And I thought, why didn't I learn sentence diagramming this way? I would have understood the structure of a sentence far better. And more than understanding it in the English language, I would have understood it in the context of understanding a foreign language, because the way that the English structure is for a sentence is different than other languages. So that would have really helped with foreign languages. Okay, let's dive into the last resources I want to share with you. And these are primarily the novels that you can use in 8th grade, but truly these would also work into high school as well. So we're looking for literature resources for 8th grade, as well as short stories and poems. So all I have right now are the complete literary resource rather than just the literary passage, but you can include, it's advised that you include poetry, that the students also write poetry, short stories, and that the students also write short stories, and you can even do some creative short stories as well. The first book I want to share with you is The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. When it comes to classics, first of all, some of them are quite lengthy. The other thing is that the style of writing can be a little bit challenging for students to get through. And of course, the vocabulary can be either vocabulary that the students haven't yet learned, or they are words that are used in a historical context that's different than the way that it's used today. What I found with my students is that while they were proficient in reading, they were not proficient in reading classics. So the way that I brought classics to my homeschool is for me to read them aloud, which is a task on occasion. The other thing that we did was that we would bring in the audiobook version of these classics. That way the students could listen to them first or listen to them in addition to reading them. And this allowed them to have a general overview of the story before they actually started to read the book itself. This was really helpful. Sometimes books have a very long, slow introduction, and you can feel really lost before the story actually starts. So listening to an oral narration or an audiobook of the book is going to be really helpful for some students. The other thing that can be helpful is, of course, you reading the story aloud, which means that not only are the students getting the book, but you are also revisiting the book so that when you put together your essays or your assignments for the book, you have great familiarity of the content. And then you can also sympathize with your students if you are also having a hard time with some of the books. J.R.R. Tolkien, we have The Hobbit, we also have The Lord of the Rings, but here I have The Hobbit, which is used often as a literary resource for probably a little bit more into high school, but definitely 7th and 8th grade could enjoy this kind of book. And in fact, if I remember correctly, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings was written for children as young as 7 to 9 years old or 9 to 11 years old. I can't quite remember, but it was for quite young children. So this, either children at that time were able to read this, or the person who was reviewing the book was just so accomplished that they felt like it would be suitable for those young children. And probably not just the writing itself, but the content itself was even suitable for younger children. When it comes to books that have movies, it is your choice whether you want to introduce the movie along with the book, the movie after the book, or the movie before the book. I have found that in general, we are disappointed when we watch the movie after the book, but a lot of times movies can be really well done. So introducing them first might be an option, but there are consequences, and I'll explain. But introducing them first might mean that you're enjoying the beauty and the artistry, the cinematography, the writing of the movie itself, so that you're not disappointed with your expectations before you read the book. The big caveat is that whatever you see visually in the movie, those visuals of the characters in the scene are going to override any imagination that you could have by reading the book. So you really have to choose the purpose of, or the goal rather, of whether you want to have the book read or just dispense entirely with the movie and not even correlate the two. They can just be two very different experiences. But you want to look at what is the purpose of bringing the movie or the purpose of bringing the audiobook, for instance. Some audiobooks are done with an entire cast. Sometimes audiobooks are done with a very talented narrator who brings different voices just on their own. Do you want that to be in the child's mind as they're reading the book or as you are reading it aloud? Those are questions that a teacher needs to ask and answer for themselves. Where the Red Fern Grows. This is another book that you could bring for middle school. Julie of the Wolves. This is by Jean Craighead George, and there are a lot of other books by this author as well. I just pulled this one. This I think is really suitable for 7th and 8th grade, and it will be a really great read aloud as well. But if you do need content that you can give to your student that is not as lengthy or as difficult as a classic, then this would be a great option. The Talking Earth, another one by Jean Craighead George, and this one again is really suitable for a student to read on their own. Before I get to these two classics, let me take you to My Side of the Mountain trilogy. This was a family favorite of ours. My students really enjoyed this book, and more so my boys enjoyed this book. And this is one where they enjoyed it so much that even years after reading it, they just picked it up for enjoyment to read through. We did read this one aloud to my students, and that meant that young and older students were listening to the content of this story, which completely was suitable. It worked really well. And it also had that unknown adventure spirit that ran through it, which is really suitable for the 7th and 8th grader as they are coming into their own with puberty, having their own needs for adventure and unknown. This book really satisfies that student and allows those thoughts and feelings to be reflected in the student, which really validates the student's desires and needs at this age. Let's move into these two classics. These ones are mentioned, the authors are mentioned as ones that can be used for 8th grade. So we have A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. We also have Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Both of these books are long, they're lengthy. Sometimes the stories can be slow, especially with Moby Dick. They generally are written in a style that is not familiar for the student. So it takes a little while to get into that style. I found that the best way for us to approach some of these classics, especially if I was not reading them aloud to my students, and this would be more for high school, I completely offered the audio version and encouraged the audio version. It'd be really great if you could do the audio version as you are reading through it so that you can also see that vocabulary, but I completely understand that just listening to the audio might just be the option, just still at the time, but having the opportunity to read through it is really important as well. if you're not going to read through the entire book, which the 8th grade curriculum by Live Education does not have the entire book. It has passages, which is really important because that way you can be exposed to a variety of authors and themes through these literary passages so that you're getting the content that you need for the lessons without investing the time to read an entire classic. And then, of course, we have The Tale of Two Cities, which is also appropriate for the high school student as well. I hope that you enjoyed this look at the books and resources that can support an 8th grade curriculum for English. I hope you'll check out the blog post that accompanies this video where you can find more information on 8th grade. The link to that blog post is in the description box below. And if you'd like to see how we're homeschooling on a daily basis, you can find me on my website at pepperandpine.com.